45. I just dragged myself around all day Sunday. I really missed Aln Mndlshn. I was mad at him for a while, for leaving and not telling me anything about it. But really, it wasn't his fault if he promised Rolls-Up that he wouldn't tell anybody he was going back to Mars, or the Bronx. I couldn't make up my mind if the whole thing about being from Mars was a put-on or not. I hung around the house, watching television and looking at my brass moon potato. Another thing which bugged me was that I wanted to ask Aln Mndlshn a lot of questions about what had happened in Waka Waka. I wanted to know how he had guessed that the Wuzzle was really Manny, Mo, and Jack. I wanted to ask him what he and Rolls-Up had talked about, although I now had a pretty good idea of that. They had talked about Aln Mndlshn and his family getting a ride home to Mars on a UFO. That is, if the Mars story was true. Something else I'd never be able to find out. Dr. Prince telephoned me to tell me he was back from his trip and expected to see me in his office the following afternoon. I figured I might as well go. Dr. Prince was sort of a jerk, but at least he was someone to talk to, and it meant I could get out of school early. Something funny happened at the school the next day. I was sort of depressed at first, and then I got angry. I felt impatient with everybody. I did something I had never done before. I tripped a kid. It wasn't as good as one as Aln Mndlshnd's trips, but it was pretty good. It had some style. "Did you trip me?" the kid asked. "Yes, Featherbrain," I said. "Care to make something of it?" The kid I tripped was a lot bigger than me, but I didn't care. If he wanted to fight, I'd be only too glad. I really felt like getting into a fight. The kid didn't want to fight, though. He just walked away. I was disappointed. In my social studies class, they were talking about the Crusades. The teacher was talking about how the Crusaders were these really brave romantic types who were models of morality and stuff and all that. Except that they never took a bath, I heard myself say. "What was that you said, Leonard?" The teacher was sort of surprised to hear my voice. I guess I hadn't said anything in class before. "They never washed. They stank. They used to douse themselves with perfume so they could stand being around each other. And they all had fleas," I said. I was really enjoying myself. "Leonard," the teacher said, "I don't know where you got such disgusting ideas, but I know there's nothing about this in our social studies textbook." "They were dirty and smelly and flea-bitten," I said, "and they pushed people around and stole stuff. I've got a couple of books all about the Crusades at home. I'll bring them in tomorrow and read to everybody about what slobs the Crusaders were." "I'm sure that won't be necessary, Leonard," the teacher said. "Oh, it won't be any trouble," I said. "I'll bring the books in tomorrow for sure." I was out of my seat and pacing up and down the aisle. The teacher had this horrified expression. She was hoping I wouldn't bring in my books that told all about the filthy personal habits of the Crusaders. I was going to, though. I was starting to feel very light and happy. My next class was gym. This was the one class I really had been afraid of. Most of the time, Mr. Jarris just ignored me, but at least once a week he'd chew me out. I don't think it was anything personal. There were quite a few kids who didn't like gym. Mr. Jarris would abuse all of them. Every so often, it was my turn. I was always afraid that each time I went into gym class, it would be my turn. I always felt sick on my way to gym. This time, I didn't. I wandered in a couple of minutes late. I was late sort of on purpose. I had made a point of taking the longest way possible to the gymnasium. "Well, well, we're glad to have you, Fatso, with us, Fatso," Mr. Jarris said. I walked up to the front of the class, which was all spread out for calisthenics. "Mr. Jarris," I said, "the next time you call me Fatso or Tubby or Lardbutt or anything like that, you're going to find yourself in a meeting with the principal, the PTA, and maybe appearing in court of law with that stupid whistle in your mouth. My only regret is that my father, Judge Nebel, will have to disqualify himself because I'm his son. But I'm sure you'll get a fair trial before a judge who will listen to all the arguments before he convicts you of verbally abusing me, fines you, gets your teaching certificate revoked, and maybe throws you in jail." Actually, my father has a rag business, but Mr. Jarris didn't know that. "Nebel, come to my office," Mr. Jarris said. He didn't roar in his usual way. He almost sounded like a regular human being. I followed him to his office. "Leonard," Mr. Jarris said when we went into his office, "we've started a corrective gym class. It's for kids that there's something wrong with bad postures, fallen arches, and kids who aren't regular, like you. I mean, no offense, Leonard, but you don't really want to climb ropes and get into the Marine Corps and kill your country's enemies, do you? I said that wasn't one of my big goals in life. Well, maybe you'd like to come and like me to get you into this corrective gym class where you can study toe dancing and grow up to be a little commie sissy boy, Mr. Jarrus said. I told him I'd like that just fine, and it would solve the problem of Mr. Jarrus having to appear in court to explain why he was insulting, stupid, and ignorant. He sent me over to the corrective gym class right away. He said he'd take care of the paperwork later. The corrective gym teacher was Mr. Winkle. He told us later that he never wanted to be a gym teacher, but there was a job open, so he took it. The class met in an empty classroom, not a regular gym. Mr. Winkle said he didn't care if we got any exercise or not. He said we could play chess or read comics if we didn't feel like participating in the class. For kids who didn't know how to play chess, he suggested that those of us who knew could teach the others. He said after everybody knew how to play, he'd give a 5-minute chess lesson at the beginning of each period. For the gym part of the class, Mr. Winkle said he would teach us yoga. He had a paperback book called Yoga Made Simple. He said he didn't know anything about yoga himself, and he'd be learning right along with us. Most of the kids decided to give yoga a try. The exercises were easy. Most of the beginning ones could be done sitting or lying on the floor. Mr. Winkle's paperback said that by the end of the book, anyone who did the exercises would be really supple and strong. I liked the idea that Mr. Winkle was doing the exercises right along with us. Gym went from being my least favorite part of school to the class I liked best in 10 minutes. The corrective gym class was made up of all the weird kids, Henry Bagel, and all those kids that everybody was regularly picked on. The ones who picked on me before Aln Mndlshn turned up. I was ready to start tripping kids and offering to fight, but everyone was sort of nice to me. It seemed that when there weren't any other of the regular kids around, the weirdos didn't mind each other's company so much. Also, we knew we were the weirdo gym class. There was no point in pretending anything else. Even Mr. Winkle looked like he had been a weirdo when he was a kid. I sort of liked him. We all did. The gym class made me feel kind of good, and for the rest of the day I didn't trip anyone or pick on any of the teachers. I left school early with permission, so I could go to my appointment with Dr. Prince. I had already decided not to bother Dr. Prince with the story of what had happened in Waka Waka. I was just going to tell him regular everyday stuff. Dr. Prince had a suntan, and he kept jumping and looking around as though he expected something to be hiding behind his chair. Except for that, he seemed to have recovered nicely from going crazy in the Bermuda Triangle chili parlor. I told him how I tripped a kid and talked back to my teachers. He seemed really happy about that. He said I was getting my aggression out in the open. Dr. Prince was a little slow in the uptake, but I guess his heart was in the right place. When I got home, I was still sad about not having a best friend anymore, but I was feeling sort of good about school. I did a lot of extra homework. I was planning to do a lot of talking in class the next day.